Would you go, if you had the chance? Not just anywhere, but somewhere you've been warned about your whole life. Imagine this. You're standing at an airport gate. Your passport in your hand feels heavier than usual. Not because of its weight, but because of what it represents. A decision. On the screen in front of you, one destination stands out. North Korea. A place people don't just visit casually. A place surrounded by questions, warnings, and silence. You've heard the stories. Strict rules. Limited freedom. Constant watch. Some say it's one of the most controlled places on Earth. Others say it's misunderstood. But here's the truth. Most people who fear going there have never actually been. North Korea is often described as one of the most isolated nations in the world. Not invisible, but distant. Not unreachable, but restricted. Travel into the country is tightly controlled. Visitors don't simply arrive, they are processed, approved, and guided. From the outside, it feels like a place frozen in distance. A place you can point to on a map, but not fully understand. Information doesn't flow freely in or out. And because of that, what we know is often incomplete. We see images, wide streets, large monuments, carefully presented scenes. But images don't tell full stories. And when a story is incomplete, it creates space. Space for speculation. Travel, for most people, is about freedom. You walk where you want. You explore what you find. You make decisions without thinking twice. But in North Korea, travel follows a different structure. From the moment you arrive, you're introduced to guidelines. Clear. Direct. Non-negotiable. You are accompanied at all times by official guides. Not as a suggestion, but as a requirement. There are rules about photography. Rules about movement. Rules about how you interact with certain symbols and spaces. Even small actions, ones you might not think about elsewhere, carry meaning here. It's not chaos. It's not random. It's structured, intentional, controlled. And slowly, that structure changes how you behave. One of the most commonly described feelings by visitors is the sense of being watched. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a subtle, constant presence. Your guides are always with you. They walk beside you. They observe quietly. They explain what you're seeing. But they're also aware of what you're doing. And that changes something inside you. Because when you know you're being observed, even passively, you adjust. You speak a little differently. You move a little more carefully. You think a little more before acting. It's not about fear in a sudden moment. It's about awareness over time. In most places, conversation flows naturally. You ask questions. You share opinions. You speak freely without hesitation. But here, words feel heavier. There are topics that require caution. Subjects that are approached with respect and restraint. Visitors quickly become aware of this. You pause before asking something. You rethink how you phrase it. Sometimes, you choose not to say it at all. Not because you're told directly, but because you feel it. That invisible boundary. And over time, that awareness changes your behavior. You begin to filter your thoughts. Not just out loud, but internally. Ask people who have actually visited North Korea. And the answers aren't all the same. Some describe a calm, structured experience. Organized tours. Clean environments. Polite, controlled interactions. Moments that feel surprisingly normal. Others describe something different. A quiet tension. A feeling of uncertainty they couldn't quite explain. Moments where they weren't sure what was expected. Neither perspective is wrong. Because North Korea isn't one experience. It's many, shaped by expectation, awareness, and perception. What you feel there often depends on what you bring with you. Curiosity or caution. Openness or fear. And sometimes, both at the same time. For most of the world, North Korea exists through media. Headlines. Clips. Carefully selected moments. missile tests, military parades, political speeches. These images are powerful. They leave a lasting impression. But they don't represent everyday life in its entirety. Because everyday life is quieter, less dramatic, less visible. People still wake up, go to work, interact within their environment. But those moments rarely make headlines. And so, the global image becomes shaped by extremes. Because extremes capture attention. And what captures attention often becomes what people believe. There's something powerful about not knowing. Because when information is limited, the mind begins to create its own version of reality. North Korea remains one of the least understood countries globally. Access is limited. Perspectives are filtered. Clarity is rare. And in that absence of clarity, uncertainty grows. Questions remain unanswered. What happens if something goes wrong? What if you misunderstand a rule? What if you don't know what you don't know? These questions don't always have clear answers. And that lack of certainty becomes its own kind of fear. Because the unknown isn't just unclear. It feels unpredictable. Not all fear comes from danger. Sometimes, it comes from difference. Every culture has its own expectations, its own meanings, its own boundaries. What feels normal in one place may carry a completely different meaning in another. In North Korea, those differences are taken seriously. Visitors often feel a responsibility to behave correctly, to show respect, to avoid mistakes. But understanding takes time. And when time is limited, uncertainty increases. You begin to question simple actions, small gestures, unspoken rules. Because it's not just about what you do. It's about how it might be interpreted. Beyond individual experiences, there is a larger narrative shaping perception. Global politics. North Korea frequently appears in international discussions, often framed through tension, conflict, and uncertainty. Kim Jong Un is a central figure in those narratives. Images of military strength, statements that reach global audiences. These moments shape how the world sees the country. And that perception extends beyond politics into personal decisions, even for those who have never been there. Because when a country is associated with tension, it becomes associated with risk. And risk often leads to fear. But beyond politics, beyond rules, there are people, individuals living everyday lives, families sharing meals, children playing in open spaces, workers moving through daily routines, moments that feel familiar. Because they are. These glimpses remind us of something important. No place is defined by a single narrative. And no group of people can be reduced to one idea. Complexity exists everywhere. And when we focus only on fear, we lose sight of that complexity. We forget the human side. So why do people fear going to North Korea? Because it's different. Because it's controlled. Because it's not fully understood. And those reasons are real. But fear often grows strongest where understanding is weakest. Learning doesn't eliminate caution, but it changes perspective. It replaces assumption with awareness, distance with context. You may still choose not to go, and that choice is valid, but it becomes informed, not driven purely by fear. Because sometimes, the biggest shift isn't in where we travel. It's in how we see the world, and how we choose to understand it. Fear often begins where understanding ends. North Korea remains a place shaped by distance, control, and complexity. But also by perception. What we see is limited. What we hear is filtered. And what we imagine often fills the gaps in between. You don't have to agree with it. You don't even have to visit. But before fear becomes your conclusion, ask yourself one question. Am I reacting to reality, or to what I've been told about it? Because sometimes, the greatest barrier isn't a border. It's the way we choose to see what's beyond it.